Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jakarta Tech Talk. My name is Serena, and joining us today is Fabio Taruso, who will be presenting on the topic of OpenID Connect has finally come to Jakarta EE. If you have any questions for Fabio as we move through today's presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Ask a Questions tab. Without any further delay, Fabio, over to you.
Thank you, Serena. Okay, so welcome everyone to OpenID Connect has finally come to Jakarta EE. This is a topic that I like particularly to talk about because if you've been on one of my talks, either online or in presence, I like to talk a lot about Jakarta EE integration with OpenID Connect. I did a talk about integration with Keycloak not so long ago, and that is tangentially related to this because, again, in order to connect with Keycloak and other OpenID Connect providers, you need to understand a bit of the technology and how interoperable it is. So this is something that I've been wanting to talk about since Jakarta EE10 come into the picture. In one of these specifications, Jakarta Security 3.0, there is a specific integration with this technology which has taken or has overtaken a lot of the security concerns for cloud services nowadays. So without further ado, let's go and get started. So first, for those of you that don't know me, I am Fabio Taruso. I work as service manager for Payara Services Limited. I am living on the beautiful city of Barranquilla in Colombia. At the moment, it's sunny outside. We're having a nice weather. And in any case, I've been working with Payara for over 7 years. I mostly handle everything related to customer success delivery and also some advocacy activities on conferences and online talks. And I like to spread the word around our products and of Jakarta and other similar technologies. And Payara Services at the moment, it's a strategic member of the Eclipse Foundation. We contribute and are part of the working groups for both Jakarta EE and Eclipse Microprofile. Because again, our solutions are implementers of these technologies, and we like contributing to them in behalf of our customers and our users. In general, what we do try is to keep up with the newest things. We like now that Jakarta EE has become this vast technology now that's part of the community to contribute more to it. So our company is focused on the Payara platform, which is a dual edition platform on both enterprise and community. And the idea is that if you are a user of Jakarta EE and you are starting with the technology and you want to know how it works or want to construct or build a proof of concept or maybe a small set of backend services or applications for your needs, you can use the community edition, which is focused on innovation. It's focused on giving you the latest things that are implemented for these standard technologies and allowing you to, hey, get a grip on how do you like the technology, how can you build applications on it. And once you are scaling, your particular business has specific needs or you are reaching a higher user base, then you should consider the enterprise edition, which is built for scalable and available production environments. We do offer at the moment a 10-year support lifecycle for these versions. And the idea is that if you don't want to worry about keeping up with the trends and upgrading your environments frequently, you should move on to enterprise and have all that you need for a stable period of time. And again, when you get an enterprise subscription, you will get also additional support with our expert team that I lead, and we will be able to help you with anything related to Jakarta EE, Microprofile, and the technology itself. So the Enterprise Edition is also optimized for critical production environments in any environment, either cloud, on premises, or hybrid. If, for example, you like to run your installations on bare metal, absolutely that's something that we support. If you are running them on popular cloud provider like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform or Microsoft Azure, then we support all of those cases as well. And finally, enterprise is also container friendly. So if you're thinking about orchestration needs and you want to deploy your applications or your entire environment into Kubernetes setup using a Docker set of images, then that's absolutely a case that is supported as well. As I mentioned, Enterprise has a 10-year support life cycle. Of the 3 major versions that we are supporting at the moment is version 4, version 5, and version 6. Currently, if you are starting new projects or are considering developing for Jakarta EE, we recommend version 6, which is compatible with Java 11 and 17. And the idea is that version 6 is fully compatible with Jakarta EE 10. For our customers, we also have the Enterprise Edition being backwards compatible with Jakarta EE 8. So if you have applications or a particular customer has applications that you don't want to convert to this new standard or this new version of the technology, you can keep running them. In some special cases, you will have to do some conversions, but most of the time you will be able to run the same application on a newer version. So let's get into the meat of the talk then. What is OpenID? And this is a word that is thrown around a lot, especially when security concerns are discussed on modern cloud environments and for microservices. An OpenID is an open source standardized solution for two important things. One, it's account management centralization. The challenge that many security, or let us just simply focus on security engineers, but developers and operations staff have to worry about is how to properly manage the data of users for their specific businesses across the universes of applications and services that are provided for them. So if, for example, I work for a big company and I'm tasked with making sure that, hey, all our applications drawing data from a centralized instance, or are they actually doing their own thing and having decentralized data spread around multiple applications in different formats and in different structure and following different password management policies, or maybe a specific integration with external providers or things like that. So instead of having to worry about that, you should be accommodating a centralized solution that will make sure that account management is following a single point of failure. Another important thing is that what happens when these applications have to reuse data from a particular user? Do you ask the user to log in again? Do you ask them to create a new account and copy the data from that particular previous instance to the new one? Or do you just simply draw from a single source of truth? In that case, the idea is that you don't need to worry about that. Everything is centralized and externalized into this solution that will allow services and applications to grab that data when needed. And to that effect, OpenID is just a standard. It's just a set of specifications that tell applications and services you should rely on an identity provider, which is an external entity that will host and protect this data based on the standards and will allow applications to talk to them in order to either authenticate those users, authorize them, verify that those users are who they say they are, and making sure that when they need the data, do they have the permissions and consent from the actual user in order to retrieve this data, or do they need to request and reconfigure those permissions to properly draw from it? And the benefit of OpenID is that since it's a standard, anyone can choose an identity provider to the needs. If, for example, I am paying an identity provider for storing my user and universe data and I don't like the way they're doing things or they're not transparent enough, I could just simply grab my data and move elsewhere to another provider. Or if in that case you don't want to become or want to rely on an external identity provider, you could become one or use a simpler solution, because again, these are standards and anyone can implement them. Why would you consider OpenID? Because again, it is an open source. All of these standards are open. They are on the web. Anyone can read about them. Any OpenID provider has to follow them and they have to certify themselves against the technology, in the sense that, hey, if you are a certified OpenID provider, that means that you are following the standards up to the letter. It is decentralized. It's not owned by any entity. It is a community. Anyone can join the OpenID standard community and contribute to it or question some of the things that are implemented if in the case that someone doesn't trust the specific processes. And the main benefit of using OpenID is that it frees the applications and websites of the burdens of account management. So if you, for example, are developing an e-commerce website, you have to start implementing the use cases and business cases of this application, the first thing that will come into place is, okay, account management. What do we want to do about it? How do we want to store the users? Do we want to encrypt their information? What about credit card data? What about details from their profiles, addresses, etc.? So in that particular case, you don't need to worry about it because it can be externalized to the OpenID provider. In that case, the only thing that this application will have to worry about is how to talk to that OpenID provider properly. In controls, how users' profiles are shared. And the idea is that, hey, when you are sharing this data, do it in a controlled manner. And finally, as a user, you have control and consent of the data. So if you will be a user of this e-commerce site and you say, oh, no, I don't want to give my account to anyone. I only want to, or to this particular site, I only want to give it to some services and part of this e-commerce site. You could control it, and OpenID establishes limitations and boundaries on how users are attributed in data and consent of the access to that data from the services. So if you have been online for the last 10 years, you know that Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Meta, or as it was probably known as Facebook, these are companies that have myriads of services among social media and around cloud services as well, but they all are OpenID implementers. Technically, they all follow the standard. So if you, for example, wanted to use any of this as the recipient or storage of user data when implementing a service, you can do that. And there are solutions in the market. You probably have seen integration with Google through OAuth, which is a standard superset of, let's say, solutions for user management. OpenIDConnect is both an OAuth at the moment. Then you could do that. You could just simply integrate it. Oh, I know. Instead of storing user accounts on my service, I just simply want to give a Google login button to the application and be done with it. And that's mainly because these technologies started implemented OpenID and have standardized in the norm around it. But if you don't want to depend on them, you could just simply move around and use something else. So on Jakarta EE, usually security has been chaos in a sense until the Jakarta Security specification, or it was previously known as the Java EE Security specification. There was no proper centralization of how security was done. The details were usually left to vendors. So if, for example, Payara or WebLogic or WebSphere or TommyE or any other Java EE vendor at that time wanted to implement security, the standards of the specifications up to that allow some basic settings and some basic configurations of what the developer could do in order to tell the application how to be secure. But everything else have to be done by the vendor, and we have to pick up the slack and allow defining non-standard solutions to allow developers to say, okay, this is how I want my application to be secure. So it was a mess in a sense. So that introduced a lot of reinventing the wheel. A lot of guidance from the specifications was not present. So that meant that users were like, okay, how do I do this next? No idea. Go read the documentation from your vendor and they will probably tell you about it. But the specification was literally hands off on the details. So Jakarta EE Security consolidated all of these solutions and introduced proper web-based security, because again, nowadays services are focused on the web, and microservices and cloud-native applications are focused around web-based security. This is still not perfect. There are some details that still being worked on as we speak, and hopefully with Jakarta 11 and the new version of Jakarta Security, there will be better and better integrations with not only OpenID, but other security standards on the web, and some of the gaps that on the specification are covered as well. So Jakarta Security introduces a simplified security model. It's well-oriented, as I explained. The idea is that if you are integrating an application on the web and you want to tell this is how your users are going to authenticate and be validated, you can do it in a simplified manner. It introduced two main concepts, something called an authentication mechanism, which is a definition inside an application that tells the user, okay, or that tells the application, this is how users are going to authenticate against a valid repository of data. And the identity store is that repository of information that will tell, okay, now that the user is authenticated, where are you going to grab that information? And finally, Jakarta Security also introduced support for expression language, which is another specification that allows users to introduce some dynamism to how configuration of these security settings is done on the application. And I will show some examples a bit later. So as I mentioned, all of this about OpenID Connect integration is brought by Security 3.0. It introduced OpenID Connect support. It was mainly the big feature on it. And along with it, introduced a standard HAM or HTTP authentication mechanism to allow users and developers, or allow developers to tell users how they are going to be authenticated against a standard identity provider. Then once that identity is validated, the state of that session is either configured in an HTTP session, which is a staple of Jakarta, since the servlet specification, and it tells the container in that case, oh, the user is already logged in to the container, and there is a session object that will store all of the information. Or you could use cookies, as many other natural web solutions do nowadays. And finally, what Jakarta Security 3.0 also introduced is a mandatory identity store for token validation. That means that since OpenID Connect uses standard tokens, you as a user or developer don't have to worry about validating these tokens. The idea is that the container, in this case, the Jakarta runtime, will do that for you, because the specification requires every vendor to implement this identity store. So OpenID Connect is then the set of protocols defined by OpenID. Again, OpenID is a set of standards. It is not only OpenID Connect. It also contains OAuth. It also contains OpenID Discovery. It also implements everything. So all the technologies, as you can see them, all does in there. So the protocol suite is an interoperable authentication protocol. It allows technically any service that is exposed online or on a network to talk to the provider and exchange data. And the idea is that when you are implementing the services, you worry about something called a sign-in flow. The idea is that a client or a reliant party that in behalf of the user wants to authenticate that user to interact with the services will tell the identity provider, okay, you and me will start a flow of data exchange between each other that at the end will end up with the user not only authenticated, but ready to interact with your services. And the idea is that that exchange happens with verifiable assertions. That means that the user tells you, I am this user. These are my credentials. The identity provider says, okay, yes, you are who you're saying to be. Now, this is something I will tell the reliant party to you, and they will give me something in return in order to continue this negotiation, in a sense. And if in the case that you need to go beyond what is implemented, the standard is extensible. There are extensions that any OpenID Connect provider can implement. And the idea is that many of them now, because again, there are standards, try to be competitive, and especially online solutions that try to externalize all of this will do their own thing and implement some of specific features like, passwordless login or integration with multi-factor authentication or stuff like that. And some of the popular solutions for OpenID Connect platforms in the market at this fall. If you were with me a few months ago, I did a talk on integration with Keycloak, but I also done in the past talks about integration with Auth0 and Okta in Jakarta in my profile. And the idea is that you choose whatever suits you. Auth0 and Okta are online services. That means that they have various degrees of plans and tiers that you can either do for free or pay money to the provider in order for you to externalize the management of user data. But if you don't want to rely on a third-party service, you can implement your own solution using either Forshrug or Keycloak, which are fully on-premise solutions that you can integrate, and you can configure the management of the database and information and everything around it. It means some extra steps and some extra concerns for you, but again, it depends on how trustful you are of the services and how much you want to dedicate on time on setting them up and all of it. So OpenID authorization is focused around two things. One, data is exchanged through tokens. There are three types of tokens managed by every OpenID solution. The access tokens, which tells an user, okay, you have been granted access in behalf of this service. So this token will let you know, or will let each service that you're calling that you are who you're saying to be. And this access token will have an expiration date. When that expires, you'll have to request a new one. There's an identity token that will tell, okay, I have verified who you say you are. This identity token will tell services and applications all of your information, your name, your email, specific email addresses, specific identity, code verifications, which profiles have you access to, which roles is your user does belong to, or specific groups and things like that. And that identity token also has an expiration date, because again, your data can change or can be revoked at some point. Then finally, a refresh token, which is used in conjunction with the access token for offline access. So let's say, for example, that a service says, I don't want to request a new access token after it expires for, like the example, an hour. Then instead of requesting a new access token through a re-logging in to the platform, you can just say, give me a refresh token. I was given this one. This will allow me to request for a new access token and a new refresh token, and I can continue asking for access tokens to be refreshed as long as this token is valid. So along with these three tokens, there are basic types of grants, and all of these are based on OAuth2, which is a superset of the protocol. These are the authorization grant, implicit, password credentials, and client credentials. For the purposes of this demonstration and this talk, we'll only be focusing on the authorization grant, which is a default workflow of how OpenID Connect works. And the basic process is a 7-step process. It begins with the end user navigating to a website or a web application. Then that user says, I want to sign in, and then gives their credentials. Again, the process states that they can give the username and password, but these credentials can be also a token. They can also be a one-time password code, or a one-time password code, or they could be login through a biometric device, or it could be a verification through a camera, things like that. How the user identifies their credentials with the OpenID provider is up to the provider configuration. Then the client, or in this case, the reliant party, will send a request to the OpenID provider telling them, okay, the user is going to be signing in, authenticate him, please. In this case, OpenID provider will authenticate that and obtains authorization, and then it will respond with an identity token and usually an access token. You can, depending on the type of flow that you're using, can get both at once, can get only one, or can get one with the refresh token as well. By default, how OpenID Connect works with Jakarta EE is that you get access token, identity token, and you have to configure your OpenID provider to get the refresh token. Finally, you can send a request to the access token to the user device by the reliant party, and that's how that user gets authenticated. Additionally, the OpenID provider has something called the user info endpoint that gives you additional details about the identity and configuration of that user profile as well. So, in that sense, the authorization grant flow works in really easy exchanges and assertions, as we discussed. The user initiates the authentication to the reliant party. Reliant party sends the request to the provider. Then the provider and the user authenticate. The idea is that, again, it could be either through password credentials, multi-factor authentication, using codes or tokens or whatnot, or biometric solutions. Once that is successful, the identity provider will send an authorization code to the reliant party. And then the idea is that reliant party can redirect to the original resource. So, for example, my application was redirected to a mobile site, and then I want to go back to what I was doing before authentication. The reliant party should take that into account. Once that is done, then the reliant party will tell the provider, give me the access and ID token, please, because we already have verified that through the authorization code. Once that is done, in order to validate these tokens, because again, these tokens could be compromised in the middle, there needs to be a retrieval of something called a JWKS or a specific key store solution or a key set solution that will be given by the provider to tell the reliant party, okay, these are signature keys that you can use to verify the integrity of these tokens. So if those tokens haven't been affected on the communication, you can carry on. And as I explained properly, then you will request the user profile for using the user info endpoint. Pretty simple. So as we mentioned, Jakarta EE Security introduced this authentication mechanism definition, which is an extension of HTTP authentication mechanism called OpenID authentication mechanism, where you can configure all of the settings for your ID provider. Interestingly, there are some basic details in here. Each application must provide something called a client ID and a secret, and these are staples of the protocol. These are usually given to you by your provider. The ID is an identifier of the application that it's initiating the process. The secret is usually a secret key that should be rotated every now and then in order to prevent, breaches and making sure that services are not compromised. Then there's a redirect URI that will tell the provider, okay, once authentication is complete, you will return to this web page on the original reliant party flow. In this case, would be the web application. And by default, the Jakarta Security introduced this placeholder called base URL that will inject the base URL of the application when it's deployed on the runtime. And finally, you have to give a provider URI, because all of this information of how to communicate with the OpenID provider, it's a standard endpoint. Each provider must introduce these details on the that well-known /OpenID configuration endpoint. If a provider doesn't give you this, then technically it's non-OpenID compatible, because this is a requirement by the specification. Additionally, you can configure logout behavior, what happens when the application logs out. And in that case, what Jakarta introduced through the OpenID authentication mechanism, it's a redirect URI. What you want to do when the service logs out. Okay, you want to redirect on a specific web page, you can do that. All of this can be defined on a CDI bin or another Jakarta component. By preference, usually it is recommended to be put on the CDI application scope bin and be done with it. So I will discuss Jakarta Security also introduced expression language support. And the idea is that you can configure these values in a dynamic way using expression language. And all of these will point to specific bins that live either on the application or additional scopes. So if, for example, you don't want these details to be exposed on the API and on the code as well, you can just simply configure this on a CDI bin that retrieves them from a database configuration, or on a CDI bin that retrieves them from a file. Or maybe you can use additional APIs and extract this information from a centralized configuration repository. So this will simplify the configuration and also make it more resilient. So what are the basic metadata that you have to configure the identity provider endpoint? This is mandated by the specification. You have to provide the authorization endpoint, the token endpoint, the JWKS URI. But again, all of these details are not configured in here. They are configured through the provider URI that will have all of that information. Who is issuing the tokens, what are the supported types, what are the supported response times, and supported ID token signing algorithms. All of the tokens exchange between the reliant party, which is the application, and the provider have to be signed. Because again, remember, those tokens can be compromised in the middle, and they have to be verified each time by the application, in this case, the Jakarta runtime or the reliant party, so that they are still valid. There's some additional metadata that you can give when configuring the OpenID authentication definition. You can give a nonce value, and this is required on the implicit flow. On the authorization flow, is not required. But a nonce value can be added to add an additional stream of security for verifying that the authentication hasn't been compromised in any way, because this will be added to the token as well, and it'll be validated by both the provider and the Jakarta runtime that implements all of this. A display value that will just simply let users know, okay, which, or in this case, every part included, what is the name of the application or the service that is executing all of the process. A prompt value that will establish how the login will be done by the provider. Can either be the login, which will force the application to log in each time that you are initiating this process, because some providers will allow single sign-on. You log in once, and then you're logging absolutely for that specific universe of data. You don't have to log in each time that you are initiating the process. There's also consent that will request consent for the user for the specific configuration of that you are requesting. By definition, each OpenID provider can also define how consent is requested, depending on the permissions that the application is requesting on behalf of the user. Also, like account, that will allow, and I think this is the case, if a user has multiple accounts and they want to switch accounts between a login process, they can do that as well. There are some extra parameters that you can also configure that too. As I mentioned, the Jakarta runtime must implement an identity store, and the identity store that the runtime implements have to do all of this. I won't go into detail because all of these validations are pretty standard whenever JOTs or JSON Web Tokens are implemented. The idea is that the token is given by the provider, and the idea in the relying party must make sure that all of these validations are completed, because otherwise it could be either a process or some misconfiguration on the authentication process, or the token could have been compromised. And as we mentioned, the main one is just making sure that the token has not expired, because all of these assertions are done for a specific amount of time. And usually, identity providers do not go longer than 1 hour validation for an access token. So after an hour, things could change. A user could have been blocked. They could have been on a different group or on a different role configuration. So it's important to make sure that the expiration is verified as well. An important thing about all of this is roles and groups. And the way that OpenID providers works is that you can configure a user that belongs to either a set of roles or groups, but usually they don't know what are the roles of groups per application. That is usually something that you can do through an extension, or you can configure on the client application itself. So, or you can do that through a private OIDC provider. You can configure an external provider that will also know that, but that will be sometimes a convoluted solution. So the OpenID authentication mechanism allows you to configure how groups are stated by the provider using additional extra claims. And this is done, with the claims definition attribute, which point to a claims definition annotation will tell, okay, when you retrieve the token from the provider, there will be a claim in there. A claim is just an attribute on the JSON Web Token that will let the relying party know the groups for the user or the identity belongs to are in this particular claim. And it's the responsibility of the provider to be configured in such a way that these groups will be retrieved. So finally, how the application is configured to allow users to access resources. This is something of a staple since the old Java EE days. You configure security constraints on a WebEx deployment descriptor. And the idea is that you tell the application, oh, there are some specific URL patterns that are protected on roles or that are mapped automatically to the groups that are retrieved from the JSON Web Token. So this hasn't changed. As I mentioned, the specification is still not perfect. In the future, I hope that this is simplified to an annotation model. And I know that there is some work that has been done. But for the moment, you have to bear with it and configure the security constraints through this means. Okay, so having said about all of that, I will show you a quick demo. And it is on GitHub under my user account, conference demo, and it's on the branch Jakarta 10 update because the main one at the moment is a bit out of date. So I'm working on that on this separate branch. So to showcase that, let me go and show you here. Let's enter presentation mode. View appearance presentation mode. Okay. So what we have now, it's a multimodule project. It is written on Maven, and the intention is that it emulates a conference demo or a conference dashboard for an application that handles conference talks. And I like to do this as part of my presentations just to keep the thing consistent. And the multi-module is composed of 4 modules. A dashboard module, which is the application, a web-based UI that will integrate with all the services. There are 3 services, one that handles the sessions or the talks that will be done on the conference, another that handles the speakers, and another that handles voting and rating these sessions. For the purposes of this demo, I will ignore this service. So the idea is I will only integrate with these 2. Now, how the services are configured, and allow me to quickly do this, is that we are going to run the speaker service first, then the session service, and all of these are implemented using PyraMicro. So let me go just quickly to the service, to the speaker service. You can see that it uses the PyraMicro Maven plugin in order to run a PyraMicro instance. It is, and PyraMicro is just a jar file that is compatible with Jakarta web profile. It will deploy the application on a specific port, and it will initiate a cluster with a specific name, not to clash with the other services. Pretty simple. And once the service is run, it will deploy a set of endpoints that you will see in a bit. Let me show you here. Oh, both of them are starting. So we can give them a few more seconds until they're ready. But in the meantime, what else you have to consider is that the services are configured to run on this parent POM file, and it defines the Jakarta platform web API profile, and it uses version 10.0. All of these services are running on Java 11. And also you can see that I'm using microprofile, which is an extension, an additional set of APIs in order to integrate some specific features that I'd like to showcase. Okay, so my speaker service has run, the same one with the same thing with my session service. All of those are ready, good to go. Let's go to the crux of the thing, which is the dashboard service. So this application, again, it's a simple application. It's configured to run the same way under the PyraMicro Maven plugin, but you can see that in here you have an security configuration that follows the same configuration that I was showing on the slide. So you have an OpenID authentication mechanism definition. It requires a client ID, a client secret, a redirect URI that hasn't changed. It will redirect the user to this index HTML. And this application is using, for the purposes of integrating with Jakarta, Java or Jakarta server faces, or Jakarta faces, which is the new name of the specification, to implement the user interface. So I'm also using prem faces because prem faces is a good extension to use, and it's pretty simple. You can see that the index page or the landing page of the application is implemented using a Jakarta faces composition. It uses this main template, and everything is configured in the way that if you are familiar with JSF, you will understand this. Pretty simple. Now, what else? There is a configuration in here called the JWSKS read timeout and connection timeout that will tell the runtime this is how long you need to wait when reading these files. Because again, these are files that are located on the internet. Sometimes it can take longer. And for the purposes of this demonstration, the provider that I choose to be used, it's Auth0. So in Auth0, and this is something that I'll have to show, I have configured this Pyara tenant. Again, this is a development tenant. This is not used in production in any way. And I have configured an application that corresponds to that dashboard. And I named that conference demo JSF application. In here, you will see that the configuration of the application on Auth0 will give me my client ID. It will give me my secret as well. And again, it's hidden. And I also have to configure, this is something that you have to do in every OpenID provider, a valid list of callback URLs. Because again, the communication starts from the reliant party, which in this case is the application. This will redirect to the OpenID Connect provider login page, and they will redirect back. You have to authorize the application to redirect to these URLs. Otherwise, it will be denied, and the provider won't even allow you to do the login, because anyone could initiate, if that is the case, a login process in behalf of an application that hasn't been authorized. The same thing happened with local URLs, because again, you could technically redirect to a local URL that is not valid and could compromise the security of the process itself. Finally, the only thing that I have to show in here is that by default, the grant types that this application allows is implicit authorization code, refresh token, and client credentials. Refresh tokens will allow the service to grant me refresh tokens whenever an application authenticates. And the authorization code is the default authorization grant that we have to show. Now, what else have I done on node 0? I have configured a set of basic users for this conference application. So there are 2 users, Michael Alpha and Carol Beta. Both of them are just dummy users that I have created. And the idea is that we have configured this under specific roles. In this case, there are 3 types of roles: an admin role, which are conference administrators, an attendee, which attend to the conference, and a speaker, which are speakers on the conference. So in this case, Michael is part of the attendee and speaker roles, and the other user, Carol, I think it's an admin, or belongs to the admin role in that case. Yes, and it also has the attendee role. So how this works is that all of this is configured in this manner. You can see here that I'm also configuring a claims definition for the OID, and this is also configured to use expression language, because all of these values are going to see, you're going to see them a bit, they're configured below. And this is required by the specification. You have to provide an audience as an extra parameter to establish which APIs or services are the access tokens that you're going to be using for. And in this case, I have identified this specific API. The API has to be configured on Auth0 as well. And let me show that here quickly. If I go on the applications APIs, you will see that there is a prior microservices conference API, and it belongs to this specific identifier https://api.prior.fish. Again, pretty simple. So you have to give this audience, because otherwise there is if you don't provide that, the tokens that you will be granted to cannot be used to authenticate users in behalf of the services that you want to connect. Now, where are my configuration settings? Because everything in here is just tied to this specific OID config bin. And you can see that I have named that as the same bin upon which the authentication mechanism resides is used to configure all of the settings. And this is what I'm using microprofile. So I am using the microprofile configuration specification or API to retrieve these values from whatever resource I want to use. And in this case, because this is a sample demo, all of these values are configured on a properties file under the microprofile config properties file as well. You can see that there is a client ID, here's a client secret. I'm also using a custom namespace in order to authorize or identify, okay, which are the claims used for retrieving my roles. And the provider URI, as we mentioned, this belongs to Auth0. And if I use that provider, sorry, here, you can see that this is what I obtained for the OpenID configuration endpoint. It is a JSON with all of the details that the provider allows and is used to. So there is a token endpoint, an authorized endpoint, a device authorization endpoint. All of these are part of the OpenID Connect standard, a JWKS URI where the keys are held, a registration endpoint if you want to allow users to register themselves, a set of scopes, and these are staples of OpenID as well. What is the data that you can retrieve from using this, etc., etc. So with all of this due, how we configure our application in order to use this, as I explained, okay, how the application is configured is that on the web XML deployment description, I have a set of security constraints because I'm using 3 roles. I want to configure 2 constraints. One's for, okay, who are allowed to call the speaker resources? And those are every web page and web resource under the -speaker-wildcard URL pattern. And in here, I'm allowing only, okay, admins, because they can do everything, and speakers can access these resources. And for the sessions resources, I can allow, in this case, the talks that I configure, the admin, the speaker, and the attendee role. So in those cases, I have configured these roles as well. And I'm configuring, okay, additionally, I want to tell my application that these are the 3 roles and only the 3 roles that I'm using, just for the sake of completeness. Finally, this is important, the way that this is configured is that once you obtain the annotation configuration of this, how do you tell the application to log in? So I have configured our auth controller. This is a CDI bin that is used by the web page on the web UI. And it has a login method that will trigger the security context.authenticate method. And in this case, the security context, this is an injectable bin defined by the Jakarta Security API that allows applications to programmatically initiate a login process. And the login process is simple. I just simply call authenticate. I need to pass over the request and the response for the corresponding web communication, and you can obtain those on JSF very simply using the faces context, get current instance, get external context, get request, and get response. And that's it. And I also have to pass a set of authentication parameters if I want to modify how the authentication is done, but I'm content with just doing the basic authentication. For the logout, it's similar. The only thing that I have to do is obtain the request and trigger the logout method of that request. And that will force the application to initiate the logout. So let's see this on real time. So let's run my dashboard. Again, the dashboard is configured to run on Fire Micro. Okay, so it should be running quick enough, and we're going over here. And hopefully we'll be ready in a couple of seconds. Okay, you can see that JSF has started and the application is ready. So this application is deployed on 88 dashboard. And in here, once I click the sign in button, you will see that I am redirected to the Auth0 authentication page. Oh, I was automatically logged in. So let me log out and let me sign in again. Hopefully I'll be redirected. Nope, I'm still logged in. Oh, because I am not forcing the application to log me in again. And this is an interesting configuration. But you can see that once I'm redirected, I'm getting the authorization code that is part of the process. So how we want to test this, how we want to reconfigure this, or we can see what's happening with the configuration or the login process, is we can tell, okay, the authentication mechanism definition that I want to log in each time. So I do this using the prompt configuration, and the prompt time will be login, as was stated. Okay, so let me stop this one, run it again, and hopefully it will be I will be able to showcase this soon. Okay. In the meantime, I can show you how the authentication is triggered in here. So if I didn't want to do this with my Jakarta runtime, I could technically do this using standard HTTP REST service integration through our client. And in this case, I'm using Postman. So this URL that I have configured, it's exactly what the application does. So if I initiate this, you can see that I'm getting a 200 OK, and what I'm getting is a web page for the login initiated by Auth0. And this is what I should be doing in the application. So if I went and get back, I would get a code, and that code, I can use that in here to exchange for the token. So once the token is done, and you can see that this is on a standard path provided by Auth0. Again, this is part of the OpenID configuration. The same thing for the authorized endpoint. Once the access token is given to me, I will be given that and the ID token as well. So okay, the application is ready. Let's retest this. Let's refresh. Yeah, have to make this. But about that, let's sign in. Now you can see that I'm being asked to log in. Let me use the user Michael Alpha. Let's continue. And now I'm logged in again, and I can execute the operations. And you can see here that I'm getting the code back. And an state. The state is used internally by the reliant party and the identity provider to also do an additional verification to make sure that everything is in place. I can call the speakers endpoint. In that case, I can just simply go in here. Let me try to create a new speaker, for example. We can use our CEO as an example. Save it, and I can execute this operation because the user has been officially authenticated. So it's very simple. The only thing that I have configured on my application is this, making sure that the user it's properly and the application knows where to find all of this data, and everything else is done by the OpenID provider. Fun thing is that you can also get some additional things. You can see that on the login page, you can see the email of the user. Where is that email? So that is configured using the OpenID context, and this is an additional annotation that you can use because this is available if you use the OpenID authentication mechanism. So once the user is authenticated, technically you can retrieve the claims of that user. That means the data and the name of that particular user. So in this case, the name would be assigned by default by OpenID to the email address. I could reconfigure that on the specific claim on the OpenID configuration of the tokens on Auth0. But if you want, you can go the extra mile, and you could technically get those using the identity token. So for example, ID token, and in this case, I can just simply say OpenID context, get identity token, and the ID token will give me additional details like like claim, or you could get the token itself and validate it or extract the details as usual. So you also have access to that from the API. Okay, so to cap it off, unfortunately, I don't have enough time, but I also wanted to talk a bit about Pyra Cloud, which is a Jakarta managed solutions on the cloud that we have as well. The idea is that you can just simply grab a Jakarta application and deploy it quickly and showcase it in here. The idea is that Pyra Cloud runs with the help of Kubernetes and Docker files in order to quickly integrate the run environment that you will have if you implemented all of this by yourself. And the benefits is that you can deploy this easily. Let me see if I can do this quickly under a minute. If I go to Pyra Cloud, give me a second. You can see that I have configured a namespace, and there's already my speaker and session services in here. And I can just simply upload the application for my, let me quickly see this. If I can just grab this. So it would be target, UI dashboard. Okay, want to deploy it immediately, and the application should be named dashboard. Let me upload. This will deploy the application immediately and reconfigure it. I don't have enough time to show the configuration, but this will just read the configuration from the microprofile configuration properties and allow you to reconfigure what you have. But since I'm using Auth0, this would be pretty simple to reconfigure You simply go to edit configuration, and you can see that all of the values in here. Here's my client ID, my secret, the namespace that I'm using, OpenID provider configuration, and I can reconfigure all of this as I like. Very, very easy to do. And once I have this, I could just simply go and click on the dashboard and have similarly the same application running. Oh, it's good. Everything is working. Can just go ahead. Okay. And now it's failing because I haven't reconfigured the callback URL, but it's mostly there. So Fire Cloud is running a free trial for 15 days. So I would encourage people to just simply go and access it in the case that you want to see how it works and test your Jakarta applications on the cloud. And that is all. Thank you. So I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you for that excellent presentation today, Fabio. So currently right now there isn't any, but I do encourage anyone in the audience to feel free to ask any final questions. You could do so in the chat or in the Ask a Questions tab. And of course, a reminder that we're always looking to book some more Jakarta Tech Talks throughout 2023. We do have some slots available this fall. So we highly encourage you to do that. I did link the form in the chat. And finally, if you do have any feedback for this Tech Talk program in specific, we'd love to hear from you. So just click on the green button when we close out this webinar session and let us know how you enjoyed the talk. So I'll just take another quick look, Fabio, in the Ask a Questions tab and or in the chat. So I don't see any questions, but that's it. So thank you very much for your time today, Fabio, and all the education and information that you shared with the audience today. You have yourselves an amazing day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. See you around.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.